Ryan here with Prudential Pest Solutions. We got a call from a client in Lancaster, Pennsylvania, which is in south central / southeastern Pennsylvania, about yellow jackets in their garage. And what they were seeing was a bunch of dead yellow jackets on the floor. And as we can see, the yellow jackets were coming in. And on the outside, they were coming in between a gap in the soffit where it meets the roof. We could see the wet spot above there. All that discoloration is all a wet spot. And that's where I suspect the nest is above the drywall there. And this is the opening where the actual yellow jackets were making it into the garage. So what some folks may do is they may just spray that opening, but that would never actually reach where the nest was. And when you see how big this nest that we took out of there was, a little can of Raid or a little even professional grade insecticide into this opening that we see would not have resolved it at all. So these are yellow jackets, and this was in August of 2020. So I have my full bee suit on. Now, typically, if this was inside of the house, with nice carpet or flooring, I would put a big tarp down and a drop cloth. But since we're on a concrete floor here, I'm not as worried about that because we're going to vacuum everything up and get everything swept up and clean when we're all done. So I have my bee suit on. I have my PTPI, flashlight, my paint multi-tool, which I really like for scraping and removing. And then I'm going to use a drywall saw to open up that area there. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to actually inject the PTPI into that opening. And all that does is it just kind of knocks down those yellow jackets that are right in that opening to make our life a little bit easier as we go to carry on the treatment here. All right, we can feel that area above is pretty soft. I could push right through it. The nozzle won't quite go through, but I mean, this is paper thin because the yellow jackets themselves have, chewed away at the inside there. And then all that moisture from the nest is what's caused that discoloration there. So you can see I just poked a hole right through with my finger, and I'm going to inject directly into the nest. Now, what's on the underside of that hole that I just made is the actual brood cells, which are like the larvae. Ton of moisture, which again is what's causing that discoloration on the ceiling. So we knew the nest was right there because of the discoloration, and also because that drywall, which is supposed to be like ½ inch thick, is really, the thickness of the paint. That was the only thing that kind of holding it together. And we can see what's falling out of there is all yellow jackets, and they're dead or they're dying. And we can see how soft that is. So what I do is I only make a hole that's big enough to get the nest out, and I typically just remove the part of the drywall that's already been damaged, that's already wet or really soft. So we don't need to open up a big, huge section of drywall just to get access to the nest. We can just open up this little section that's already damaged. It's already going to have to be replaced either way. And I try to make it look as pretty as possible so that whoever has to come and actually repair the drywall has an easier go of it. So we can see there, what just dropped down there was the drywall itself, which was super thin. And then we have a layer of paper, the wood pulp that the exterior of the nest is made of. So even though they make the nest inside, they still make that paper ball around the nest. And since more of the area is exposed now, I'm just going to inject further into the wall voids there just to, knock their numbers down. And again, you can just see the yellow jackets falling out of this opening. And this is a pretty good sized nest for August rather. So yeah, we're just kind of poking and prodding, just injecting more PTPI into that void. Now we can see here, this is what's actually falling down. So these are yellow jackets, obviously, either dead or in the process of dying. When they move around and act like that, obviously the chemical has taken its effect. And I really like that PTPI because not only does it permeate that entire void, but it also works pretty quickly here. And speed is very important when you're dealing with hundreds, if not thousands, of stinging insects like this. So there's the underside of the nest there. We can still see the paper backing, the brood cells. Let's get a close-up here. Pretty neat. You can see the larva. You can see the paper. All the white there, that's the caps on top of the larva, and those are the ones that are going to emerge as adults, which is why these nests kind of grow seemingly overnight, because this nest has been growing since the springtime, but as there's more workers, that's more workers to help raise more, and the nest just kind of explodes in population. And again, we're going to get all that cleaned up when we're all finished up then. So now we can actually start removing the nest. And I usually wait until when you first inject the product, you'll hear the nest just come alive. It sounds like a loud buzzing noise. And once it quiets down, we know that the majority of them are dead. So we can start getting more hands-on with the nest. So there's a big waffle comb there. Like I said, this nest was pretty extensive, and the more you see me pull out of there, what I think happened was I think there was a nest in there from the year before, because they don't reuse the same nest, but I pulled a lot of paper and a lot of old nest out of there. So I think that the year before there was yellow jackets in there, and then the queen is the only thing that's going to survive the winter, and then a new one came to that same area and started another nest. So this is all the active nest, and you can tell because the comb has all that white capping and all the larvae in it. So we're still pulling out active nest. You can see that's a lot of them. They're all over my fingers. I wear thick welding gloves because they can't sting through it, and also because the gloves are long enough they extend beyond my wrist, which is important when you're reaching just blindly into a wall void. You don't want anything going inside of your gloves. I've had that happen. That'll wake you up. So that was a big chunk of paper backing there, paper nest there. That's what I believe was from last year, because that was a fully intact, non-active part of the nest, and they wouldn't have built that this year. So before we finish anything up, I really reach around in that void. We're going to leave all the insulation in there as long as it's intact and in good shape, which it was here. And I'm just going to make sure that we have everything out of there. Now, the more nests we remove, the more exposed area there is. So I'm going to hit it with the PTPI again, just to make sure we have any stragglers that are we're hiding in the back. We're going to take care of them. More pulp of the nest. And again, I think that's from years prior. Now, this client did not want to use a lot of chemical, and so we're not going to apply a long-term residual dust in there. The PTPI they were okay with because there's not a residual component to that. It's just a quick knockdown aerosol that doesn't have any longevity to it. You can see just how much stuff we pulled out of this little opening here. I mean, that is just a ton. That's why I think it's from last year as well. I think it was two different nests over 2 different years. One active, one inactive. There's more. And a little piece of insulation came off with that one. But if that was all from this year, I mean, that would just be absolutely enormous. So again, I'm just sweeping my hand through there, getting all the dead bodies, getting all the old nesting material, new nesting material, just getting everything all cleaned up. And like I said, we're not going to apply any type of long-term residual in there because we know that the few yellow jackets remaining that were out of the nest are going to come back. They're not going to be able to rebuild. And again, this client was adverse to using any kind of chemical other than the non-residual laying PTPI. In similar circumstances, if the client would have allowed, we would have applied a long-term dust like a tempo dust from Bayer, which is a longer residual dust. The insects come across it and it kills them. So that would have taken care of any stragglers. I also like using alpine dust, which is dinotefuran. A little bit lower toxicity, but it does the same thing. It gives us more residual. And like I said, once everything's done here, I have some tape and we're going to tape everything up. I just want to make sure that the void in there is completely silent before we do that. And then we'll tape everything up, and I'll get everything thrown away and get it vacuumed and swept up so everything looks all pretty and nice. And of course, I always stage the nest afterwards just so I can show the client the pictures of what was growing and alive in their own home, which I think is kind of neat too. So now comes the tape. Nothing special. I know that we don't want to do anything more permanent because, the client's going to have a drywall person come in and patch this area up. So my main focus here is just using some black duct tape, closing up the opening so that any stragglers that do make it back into that void, again, because we're not using any kind of residual chemical in there, can't make it into the actual garage itself. So they'll just kind of be hovering around in that void. They're going to be like, where's my home at? Now, sometimes with the tape, if the drywall is really compromised or we got to use a different product, it may not adhere as well, so we might have to make a bigger section of tape. But this was actually sticking pretty well. And I usually go a bunch of strips longwise and then 2 on each end perpendicular to them to kind of just hold everything in place. And then we'll seal up that original hole that they had too. Again, we just want to just seal off that area so any yellow jackets that were out and about, when they come back, they can't make it into the garage again. I was really astonished with how big that nest really was, and how much stuff I was pulling out of there from, even just from this year, just the active part. I mean, those combs of the nest were pretty large in diameter. And you can see that just with that amount of white capping on there, how even in another week or two, how many more hundreds of workers would have emerged from there. Which is how you can see, why August and September and even into October are very, very busy months for us here in southeastern Pennsylvania for yellow jackets, hornets, bees, and wasps, because their populations, that's when they're at their largest. So that's when folks really start noticing them. And that's a common theme with a lot of these too, is that folks will think these just kind of sprung up overnight when really they've been building since the spring, this current spring, but you don't really notice it until either damage occurs or their numbers become so great in August, September, and October that you really notice it. So we're just kind of getting that stuff cleaned up. Like I said, I'm putting my gloves back on so I can move some of the nest aside so I can really see how many of the brood cells are there, how big the active nest actually was. And again, it's a great photo op for our clients, a little gift from us to them, so they can remember the incident. Hopefully remember their experience with us very fondly. And this project actually occurred on a Saturday because, I kind of joke that pests aren't 9 to 5 and neither are we. But, this isn't like having ants in the kitchen. This is hundreds, if not thousands, of stinging insects inside of the house. Now, this was in the garage, but still, this happens in living rooms, bedrooms, basements, all the time. So we need to make sure that we're out there same day to get it taken care of. And this is just a more close-up of all the nesting material that we took out. Again, all those white caps on there are all the larvae ready to emerge as adults that would have resulted in this nest just getting that much bigger in the next weeks. So again, this nest was in Lancaster, Pennsylvania, which is in southeastern/south central PA. Prudential Pest Solutions is a full-service bee and hornet, wasp, yellow jacket experts, and we can handle any issue that you have, from treating and removal to prevention. So if you have a pest issue, give Prudential Pest Solutions a call at 484-401-4361.